ask you a question here. Down at the
Sure.
bottom, should I press share screen and then we'll go to the presentation?
Is ready for you.
All right. I think I, I think we're there. I,
Yes, sir.
I can't see anybody else though. Does that mean that I need to hit
Hmm?
share
Is
your
that one
screen?
that's, you can use that one, or you can click that one that is on the bottom on the PowerPoint screen. Remember the little screen on the bottom?
Oh, down at the bottom.
Yeah,
Okay.
that one, right?
That one right there. How's that?
So now is the whole screen.
Okay, very good. All right, so we've kind of been through this piece of it, and Edward covered it quite well. This is a participation oriented event. I made that up that phrase myself. I love alliteration. So uh, ask questions as we go through. I think typically Edward likes for us to do that at the end, and you're welcome to add that to your chat box. But the purpose, once again, is for us to take a look at what the difference is between all of these generations. In addition to the generational differences, I also wanted to throw in the COVID-19. I think that's an important factor. But what those generational differences are and what the impact of this pandemic has had on uh, everybody, everybody from the mature generation to the millennials and Generation Y. So we need to really try to pull that information together. I did quite a bit of research to try to find, because that's not information that I carry around in my head on a regular basis. So I've done some research on the pandemic and how that research has impacted, or how that information has impacted those generational differences. Why is this subject important? Well, if we take a look at why this could be an important factor, we're trying to constantly create harmony, mutual respect for each other, joint effort, and overall civility. And I don't need to tell you that there is an underlying waterfall that says there's some suspicion, there's some mistrust and isolation. I'm hoping that some of the information that I'm going to provide to you today will close some of those gaps, and that knowledge will be helpful to all of us, including me. I mean, as I pull this information together, I really did learn a lot, and I hope that it will be of assistance to you. So what are these five generations? The mature generation was everybody who was born before 1946. Believe it or not, there's still about 40 million of those folks in existence. It's a very interesting generation. Actually, all the generations are interesting. The mature generation is a generation that is disappearing because of age, but they have a lot to provide to us. I know when I was working for Franklin Wire, Franklin Display, that we had several individuals who were repair people and the types of people who could fix equipment, and sometimes they could fix equipment that no one else even knew how to fix. So this mature generation has a particular place in the marketplace that could be very beneficial to everyone. The next generation is the baby boomer generation. I don't need to tell you too much about that. It's 1946 to 1964. It's about 70, 80 million people living in the United States that belong to that generation. Then as we move down the line, it's Generation X, a really interesting generation. 1965 to 1981, about 50 million of those folks. Generation Y, which is the next one, that's 81 to 1990. That's commonly known as the millennial generation. And then the last generation that is currently growing and becoming very, very strong is Generation Z. Those are born after 1980. Many of the people who put these generations together have not had a final date on when that generation will actually close, and we will go to a sixth generation. So we'll take a look at each of the individual generations, some of the value systems that they have, some of the ways that they look at life. I'll go through these very, very quickly. You could read as well as I can, but I want to make just a couple of points that I think will be helpful to all of us. In their work-life balance, and I've divided this into different categories: work-life balance, background, loyalty, communication style, use of technology, personal time, and the pandemic effect in terms of influence as well as results. So effect and effect. This group grew up in a very difficult time. These were depression babies. So they were youngsters when their parents were going through depression. My mother used to frequently talk about the very difficult times of the depression, and it had an impact on every single person who lived through that time frame. There was not one that I've ever talked with who did not have some very difficult times and some very, I would say, almost emotional scars from that time frame. Their work ethic is without question probably the strongest of all 5 generations. They just like to work. They know that if they're working, that they're providing for their family. And as long as they have legs and arms and hands, they want to use those as best they can. Their loyalty is to their family and to their job. Their communication style is very direct and simple. Their use of technology is almost non-existent. They just did not have that in their DNA or in their history. So they're not adept at that. Although if you give them something to learn, they will do everything they can to learn it and also use it. Their personal time and relaxation is typically focused on their family, and also they want to make sure that they have some job security. The pandemic effect is to continue to work until they cannot. Get the shot and get back to work. So that's kind of their focus. The baby boomer generation, I don't need to tell you too much about these folks because I think most of the people who are with us today either are really close to that generation or in that generation. The work-life balance, boomers have a significant influence on society, politics, and industry. Their background came of age during the tremendous economic expansion that was after World War II. Their loyalty, according to the Boston College, 60% of workers from the early part of baby boomers would like to spend an entire career with one company. Those things just don't happen in today's market anymore. 30% were born between 77 and 86. And those people also have that desire, but it's not as strong as the earlier part. Communication style, an idea group, lots of conversation focusing on different approaches. This is also a very rebellious group. During the Vietnam War, there was a lot of protests. There was a lot of psychological and societal changes as a result of the Vietnam War, and that had a major impact on how we look at life today. Their use of technology, they picked it up slowly and gradually. Concern for government, they still do not completely trust the government. I think that's part of their societal legacy. Their personal time, like so many of us, love their families, receive their value system from the mature generation. Pandemic effect. Influence was a natural fear down to basic human nature. Let's get this thing over. Let's move on and let's get out of this so that I can see my kids, my grandchildren, and what can I do next to make that happen and happen more effectively. Generation X. Generation X is a very interesting generation. They came right into the group that right after the baby boomer generation, and many of the baby boomers had Generation Xers. This is a really different generation, and it's a generation that we have to have a lot of respect for, primarily because they remember when you didn't have cell phones. They remember when you didn't have computers. They remember when the only phone you had was the phone in your kitchen with the long cord. Those kinds of remembrances, for lack of a better word, have a tremendous value to not just the marketplace, but to educating the millennials for the baby boomer generation who are still in the market. So those three generations are working together, sometimes not together, but they try their best. In terms of work-life balance, it's a new value system. They believe that they work to live, not live to work. And that was the major generational difference between the baby boomer and Generation X. Generation X said, no, I'm not going to just make my life revolve around work. I'm going to work to live and live to work. Usually both parents worked outside the home. It was the most unsupervised generation and have developed into very self-sufficient adults. Background, expect diversity, fully accept women in positions of power. They walk their talk. They're pretty street smart. They're process oriented, and they're technically adept, not quite as much as the millennials, but technically adept. Loyalty to relationships and products, work hard to provide for their I say liver. Why did I do that? Provide for their life and their family, not their liver. Okay, communication side, want to know what the results are and should be determining a method for that result. Technology, first generation to use computers, cell phones, remember home phones with cords, like I mentioned before. Personal time, relationships in and out of work are very important. Marrying much later in life, demand freedom to live with liberty and to enjoy life. Pandemic effect is respectful of guidelines of mass. Social distancing and their business colleagues, especially family relationships. However, they're a little tired of the long wait to get on with life. Common question is, what is taking so long? Let's get vaccinated and move forward. Let's make this thing happen. Generation Y, the millennials, a very unique group. All of them are unique. I don't know why I call some of them unique and others not. Nurtured by family, use the internet as a primary means of communication, entertainment, and learning. Require fun and stimulation in both in and outside of work. A very different change from the Generation X. Okay, Generation Y is saying, as millennials, I want to be entertained. I want to be able to learn in groups. I want to do things in groups. I want to be able to do things independently, but I want that stimulation from other people. They're confident, they're ambitious, they're technologically sound, sometimes impatient. Their loyalty is to technology versus relationships. Their communication style is simple, clear, verbiage. They're smart, not overly emotionally driven. They like relationships, but they're not emotionally driven as some of the other generations that we previously discussed. Use of technology is superb. Their personal time needs lots of time to themselves and more time with friends and close family. Pandemically, they love the whole Zoom thing because that technology is where that's where they live. So this Zoom piece is something that they feel very comfortable with, but they miss time with their close friends and close members of their family, just like everybody else. The last one, Generation Z, work-life balance. This is commonly known as the silent generation. This is a generation that is not overly verbose or overly verbal. Computers are their life. They love people and they love relationships, but they also love technology. From their background, technology is ruling their world. They know that. They also know that the world revolves around human relationships. Their formative years are in cyberspace. This is, let me take a break from this for just 1 minute. This is a generation that's very different than the millennials. The millennials have the highest rate of debt from college tuition of all the other generations. Generation Z seems to be focusing on making sure that if they go to college, that they have a plan or a scholarship or money from grandma or somebody so that they don't have the debt that the millennials have. So this is a generation that has a different value system than the millennials. And I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that they have seen what happened to the millennials and the debt that they have accumulated, and they're very concerned about that. From a perspective of loyalty, they're very collaborative, creative people. And they want to do everything they can to increase that creativity just because they like to be creative people, okay? Communication styles, mostly through the internet, show low communication skills. However, some people will argue with you and say that their communication skills are better than the millennials. Use of technology, accustomed to instant action social networking tools, prefer computers to books. Their personal time, these are children of Generation X, so they're technology babies. Pandemically, it's predicted that they will change the workplace dramatically in terms of work style and also expectations. So those are the generations, and we're going to kind of break those down into pieces as we go through. And we'll go to next. We'll go to the 7 ways that that the pandemic has had an effect on. For some reason, I can't read that. So you're not alone. The people around you are depressed at times, anxious, stressed. Some more than others. That's a quote from Karen Newman back in the latter part of 2020. We're anxious, depressed, and traumatized as COVID-19 spread through China in January and February. Researchers were already sending out questionnaires to citizens locked down in their homes. Half a dozen studies show that 10,000 respondents, they found that people were experiencing worse mental health problems than before, high symptoms of stress, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. Up to half showed serious signs of depression, depending on the study, while up to 35% showed some serious anxiety. So there was some difficulties with the mental part of that. Some of us are lonely, some of us are not. Stay-at-home orders and social distancing have left people isolated, so it makes sense that we would be feeling lonely. 1 out of 7 adults said that they were often and always lonely in April, 25% from 2018. But another study in the US, Canada, and the UK found that people's feelings connected to others didn't change much from before to during the pandemic. So it just depends on who you're talking to and the groups that you're studying when you take a look at this isolation issue. Domestic violence has increased. One police station just over 100 miles from China, for example, reports 3 times higher in February. In New Orleans, domestic aggravated assaults jumped 37%. Similar trends have been reported in Spain, Italy, Germany, Brazil. As people are stuck at home, calls to helplines are surging. Number 4, the effects depending on your personal lifestyle and demographics. Older people have greater health risk. It seems that younger people who are struggling and emotionally. According to studies in Spain, China, and Slovenia, younger people tend to be more depressed, anxious and stressed, traumatized in the era of COVID-19. Same is true for women who may also be lonelier. There's no clear explanation for why this may be true, but researchers have some speculations. Women tend to have worse mental health in general, and certain stressors right now, like the added burden of caregiving and the risk of losing jobs, may fall more heavily on women versus men. So that's not a good news piece as it relates to the gender piece. This continues. For younger people, it could be disruptions of their routine. College students who have had to adjust to online schooling. In studies across China and the United States, the more pandemic was affecting people in their daily lives, more anxious they felt. Personalities also influence how you fare in tough times. 2 related traits that seem to matter during the pandemic are our ability to tolerate uncertainty and our ability to tolerate distress. Well, it's hard for anyone to struggle or face the unknown. Some people are less comfortable with that than others. Right now, it's those people who seem to be ruminating, or what I call chewing, more feeling and more afraid and experiencing more depression, anxiety, and PTSD. I might add that this information, it was not just generational, it was more directed toward the human side and the individual countries that we have read about and experienced as we lived through the pandemic. It's worse for the disadvantaged. People of poor health and chronic disease tend to have higher stress, anxiety, PTSD. Your income and education matter. The less stable your income and the less educated you are, studies suggest more anxiety, depression, and stress. That happens to be something that has, I believe, very little to do with the pandemic. It has everything to do with your station in life and your particular education level, and also where you place or where you have found yourself in the greater component of society. So that has everything to do with that. The effects are compounded. Black people have been hit on all sides with the threat of loss and life. Renee Anderson, assistant professor, University of Michigan. It's exhausting, depleting, and depressing. Other people of color are suffering disproportionately under pandemic. Nearly 1/5 of Latino adults were experiencing serious psychological distress. The CDC Disease Control in Atlanta estimates that Latinos make up over half of the U.S. agricultural workforce, a group of essential workers whose jobs put them at greater risk of infection. One of the biggest disruptions to our daily lives today is the pandemic. Doctors, nurses, paramedics are taking the urgent task of caring for these patients while other essential workers are putting themselves at risk to sell food, deliver mail, pick up trash, all those essential workers. Many office jobs have transitioned to remote work, asking employees to isolate with many precarious juggling work and care for children and elders. And that has, going backwards, that has a major impact on the female gender. Other people have been unable to continue work during the pandemic, waiting for time when they'll be called back, while some have been laid off entirely. Unemployment in the US has more than quadrupled. And all of us know what those impacts are. All right, so what are some of the conclusions that we can draw from that? Few times in history have 4 generations or even 5 of workers under one roof. In many typical businesses, there is one veteran, a pre-baby boomer generation, followed by some baby boomers, followed by some Generation Xers and Generation Ys. Naturally, the different generations have different work experiences. For example, many veteran workers grew up under a work ethic of simply doing what they were told to do in the workplace. On the other hand, Generation Y employees view the workplace as a place for sharing ideas and suggestions. As we also mentioned when we talked a little bit about Generation Y, though their impact is really through the ability to work together in groups and work together collaboratively so that they are able to gain information and ideas from other people to make something better. This might lead to a veteran worker automatically assuming Generation Y employee is either lazy or looking to cause troubles, while Generation Y employee might view her or his veteran counterpart as someone who refuses to adapt to change. So let's explore these concepts just a little further. Top tips of Generation Xers and how they have survived the COVID-19. Three of those are their keys, Generation Xers, is to be self-reliant. Find it within yourself to depend on you for stimulation, intellectual growth, emotional security, and most importantly, reach out to others, maintain friendships, and try to create new ones. And they got that concept from what we call lock key kids, which is what Generation Xers are. They had to go find the lock that was under the rug in order to get into the garage and then inside the house, because mom and dad were both working. First time ever that mom was not at home for a generation, and Generation Xers know all about that. And they had to call their mom as soon as they got into the house that they were safe and sound. And the mom's first request was, or first demand was, do your homework and then start making macaroni and cheese. So they also believe that it's very important that they manage time. This is all, that is all they have is time. Take care of it. Get chores done, work done, and then play. We need all of them. Mom always said, do your homework first and then play. Workplace flexibility. Navigating a new routine while you work from home is not a problem. The work is the same. The interactions are similar. Just make those interactions meaningful. If you have a difference of opinion, do not hesitate to voice that opinion and then find some common ground. So that's how their generational values have had some impact and some positive pieces for, I believe, Generation Xers. Looking at Generation Y, the millennials, they have about 4 different pieces that have been very helpful to them as they go through the process of surviving this horrible pandemic. Resiliency, efficiency, collaborative originality, and technological mastery. Resiliency is to make sure that you do everything you can to do what is best for you and best for your friends. Efficiency, when the pressure is on, you make it happen and you have to depend on yourself. Collaboratively and originality, do you know how to solve problems outside of what you do at work and at home with friends and family? You have a good sound mind and you can use that mind and use people's ideas to pull things together. This is a very collaborative group of people, and collaboration is in their head. Okay, you mastered many different games and things that they were able to do on screens. Kick Generation Z's butt in Fortnite because they're probably better at it, and trade securities on their iPhone. Zers, they have emotional pliancy, trophies for everybody. Participation is key, not winning, but being a part of a team. Downward mobility, sometimes all your work is not enough. Get over it and work a little harder, and you can do it. It just takes patience, and patience is highly rated skill for Xers. They can also be a little skeptical. They question everything. Frequently, we hear and believe 80% of what you see, all of what you do, and only 50% of what people say. so they're a little, they can be very, very skeptical when that takes place. So what does all this mean? How do we kind of bring this together and make sure that we have some takeaways from this? Across the world, humans are living through a period of extraordinary change, job loss, businesses closed, graduations canceled, all those things that we've seen. Familiar routines are involving work, school, exercise, weekend recreation, all of those things are tossed out the window. Moving forward, there's more uncertainty on the horizon. We don't know when, if all these jobs will come back, when schools and offices will reopen, although it seems that in recent past that's going to be changing, which is wonderful and a great added piece of news for everyone. Because we want a hug from our grandkids. We want a hug from other people that we know and that we care for. Many of us don't know whether we'll be able to pay the rent or mortgage. Trauma and upheaval are coming at us from all sides, and no one can predict when it will let up. So the financial impact of this pandemic has had a huge effect, especially in the lower echelons of our society. Moving forward, there's more uncertainty on the horizon. We don't know when, if those jobs will come back or if they will, when schools and we know that some of these schools and some of these offices will be reopening, especially schools, when we'll be able to hug our grandparents and all of those things. Continue that just another couple of steps. What is adaptability and why do we need it? That adaptability word is something that was constantly provided to me as I did my research in this area. They said that it is without question the single most important component to living through this pandemic, and that is our ability to be adaptable. I define adaptability as the ability to be creative and flexible in the face of new situations. This is done by a licensed professional counselor in New Jersey. Most of us have a tendency to shut down in the face of new things, but change is like a rip current. For those of you who are not familiar with rip currents, a rip current can kill you. And if you're in the ocean, you need to not try to swim toward the shore, but parallel to the shore in order to live. I advise people to ride change like a wave. If you fall, a rise will follow. Take part of small bites and big problems means differentiating between the things that we can control and can't control. We need to make sure that we have a perspective known in career counseling as positive uncertainty. We start by accepting that we'll get through this, accepting the world is uncertain, and being comfortable with that uncertainty gives us the confidence to be flexible. That sounds good, and it's easier said than done, but I think that there's some pieces of that we can take a look at. All right. All three generations have a commonality. Number one is adaptability, that confidence that we have control of our future, the work ethic to make things real and happen in our life. It's been my pleasure to be a part of this today. Thank you so much for your attention. I wish each of you well. May you have many successes in the things that you endeavor. And I, again, thank you for your time. Edward?
Thank you both. If you have any question, I guess that this is the right moment to do it. At least I got one.
Okay.
Bo, do you think that technology probably is the biggest challenge that baby boomers are facing in this new era where everything is moving toward technology? Do you believe that probably that is the biggest challenge that they face? And how do you recommend that they can overcome this?
Edward, that is a great question. And that is something that I didn't really expand upon in this particular presentation, but I think that your question is spot on. And if you look at the baby boomer generation in its entirety, and from the standpoint of its generational differences to what we are experiencing with X, Y, and Z, that yes, has been, and probably will continue to be something that is a struggle for the baby boomer generation. Personally, I think that as I interact with baby boomers, I think that their ability to adapt to that is growing and getting better, but it's certainly not up to the measure of generation X, Y, and Z, especially the millennial generation. The millennial generation has a strong component to technology. That's a great question. My simple answer is the baby boomer generation is still struggling. And I think probably the best response to that is to go get some help. Talk to people who know more about technology than that generation does.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have a question?
I just had a quick observation. Do you think some of that with the baby boomer generation is due to their kind of proximity to retirement age? I kind of use my father as a kind of a typical case where he avoided technology for the majority of his career. And toward the end, he even to the point of refusing to really use a computer as a tool and delegating that work out. And it's ironic that, after he had retired, he went back and got his MFA and had to relearn computer skills that he never really learned before to do his thesis and do whatever research he's doing. And he never really escaped it, but his attitude is he learned what he needed to, and that was it. And is a recent convert to social media, but very, it seems to have a different definition. So I kind of attributed that with him, that he figured he'd retire and he wouldn't use it anyway.
Right. That's a great story. That's a great story. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that, let's see, how do I, hang on, just 1 minute. Okay, good. I'm back. I think that's not uncommon. I'm in the baby boomer generation, and I can't tell you the number of people my age who, when computers were coming around, there were people that said to me, "I'm not using a computer," and I said, "Okay, that's certainly your prerogative, and certainly something that you can do if you want. However, I believe that technology is the future. There is no question about it. It makes us more efficient. It makes us move things faster. Information flow is better. This whole presentation, or not the whole one, but I would say at least half of the information that I have in there came off the internet. I mean, it's information that I have gathered through the ability to know something about how to use the internet, so that we can gain and be smarter. I mean, there's a reason why most of the encyclopedia companies have gone to internet flow. They don't need to publish encyclopedias anymore. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the baby boomer generation falls into a couple of categories: those who don't want to, those who want to but don't know how, and those who do know how and are becoming much more inculcated into society. So that's a great observation. By the way, I wish your father well.
Yeah, it's funny, that commercial where they have that company says, it's kind of a gag that they're preventing people from becoming their parents. That kind of typifies how my father is. I get a kick out of it all the time.
Yeah, that is a great commercial.
It is.
It actually, to be very candid with you, it's a little bit difficult to watch at times.
I got one more question, Bo.
All right.
I belong to the X generation.
Right.
I'm a kind of generation, as you say very well, that is very special in the way that we saw the evolution of technology. We saw cassettes, the cassettes moved to CDs, and just that's one example of how fast we saw changes in our lifetime.
Yes.
Also, that brings some kind of challenges because, as you say very well, sometimes in the past I deal with people that, as you say very well, they don't want to deal with technology, but they are in management positions. They are baby boomers and they are decision makers. How you can work with both generations in both sides? For one side, we got baby boomers that is still in managerial positions, and for the other side, we got millennials that they got valid points and ideas about how to change the workplace. In the past, and the millennials always say that, why we have to work 8 hours when with technology we can make it in 4. You take 8 hours because you use paper trail to make your things. Now we use technology, so I can make the same job that you made in 8 hours, I can make it in 4. So we are, as X generation, facing the fact that we are going to take the next management positions after the baby boomers. Which could be your best advice to deal with both sides? That things so different, but you are in the middle. We are in the middle of that.
Yes, you are. You are, and that's a great observation, Edward. And I think that I think that's going to be the number one challenge when it comes to running companies more efficiently, just because the baby boomers are, and I don't need to tell you or tell anybody else that the baby boomers are moving away from those particular roles. And Generation X, I think, is the best generation to pick up the ball and move it forward down the field. There is no question about one thing for sure, and that is Generation X is probably better equipped to make that transition happen and make it happen in a very effective way versus millennials or Generation Z. There is a lot of people who study these generations. There's a lot of people who have a great deal of faith in Generation Z. And the reason why is because Generation Z seems to be a very observant group of people. And they're saying to themselves, we don't want to be millennials. We want to be closer to the workplace and the work people and the work relationships. And that kind of thought process, I think, is going to be a good bridge for the Generation Xers. In a very simplistic way, I believe at times Generation X needs to get the baby boomer in the same room with the millennial, because there's a definite rub between those two generations. And if we can, yes, no, you're standing right in the middle of the room and you're saying to yourself, how do I get these people to listen to each other? Okay. And that's going to be your challenge, Edward. You need to make sure that these people open their ears and shut their mouth and listen to what those differences are, because you'll never have, and I very rarely say never, but you'll never have that component of collaboration between those two generations until they understand each other. And that's going to take patience, time, a little love, all that stuff. Lynette?
So I'm listening to this, and COVID's put a whole new, whatever you want to say, on the whole situation with work and all of that. And we are definitely seeing that. So you've got the baby boomers who have the work ethic and feel like you have to be at your desk 8 to 5. And you've got the millennials and some of these other generations that this is like a godsend for them, because now they can work from home and have their flexibility in their schedules and everything else. So if you look into your crystal ball, what do you see for a future workplace? Because I don't see everyone going back to the way it was. I don't see that ever happening ever again. But I'm just interested, curious what your thoughts are on that, because I know it's a huge thing that we're going to be dealing with in the next point.
It's interesting. It's interesting to say that. And Lynette, I think I'm pretty smart, but I don't know that I'm smart enough to give you a good answer to that question. That's a great question. I do think, just my 2 cents, I think that you're absolutely right. We will never see another full force where you have offices full and people coming to work at 8 o'clock and leaving at 5 or 6. I think that's going to change. I think it's going to change for some companies forever. Mm-hmm. I think that there are some companies that need to have that interaction. They need to be there at certain times. I'll give you a perfect example. Our son developed a company about 10 years ago, and it's just now, believe it or not, getting off the ground. And the reason why he had so many difficulties was he wasn't schooled in business, and he wasn't, along with his partner, he wasn't adept at making sure that the people that they hired were the right people. He actually had an accountant out of California take over their books, and he robbed them of about
Oh, geez.
$40,000. You know, but that was just, that wasn't stupidity. That, or it could be called stupidity, but it was also lack of experience and lack of knowledge, lack of accounting practice, all of those things. But today, running along at a high rate of cash and cash flow, they still are saying to themselves, we're never going back to the kinds of brick and mortar that we used to have. They had a place in Boston. They had a place in the mountains in California. I mean, in Colorado. They had another place in Texas, and they've closed all those down. They just don't, they just don't need it. And on the internet, they sell out of their product in a 2 or 3 day period. So they're just, I mean, to use his words, we're kicking butt, Dad. But that's just one company. I mean, if we look at the big picture, Lynette, I agree with you. I don't think that we're ever going back to this brick and mortar that we used to experience. And some of that is kind of sad, because I think it's those relationships that sometimes make things happen. Mm-hmm. But we can still have relationships with people. It'll just be over the phone or over Zoom, or there's a new one out, Edward, you would know better than me, called Teams. I think
we're using that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's
Teams.
there's just all kinds of ways to have those interactions, to have those relationships. And I think that I don't know.
Well,
I think it's going to be tough.
To that point, there's still the baby boomers are still in the leadership positions and everything else, and I know the next generations are coming into those. But right now, with everything going on, you still have this huge disconnect. Like, I'm a cusper, so I'm baby boomers and that, but they still think that you have to be at the office to be productive. And even through all of this, I mean, you see the people that have work ethic, they're working 8-9 hours a day still, like they were when they were going to the office, and other ones, I don't know what they're doing. So it's
yeah, that's very, very true. And that kind of goes to what Edward was bringing up. If I can do my work in 4 hours rather than 8, why do I have to work 8? And that's
you don't have enough work then.
Right, and that means you don't have enough work. That's going to be difficult. And Edward, we're looking to your generation to having all those answers. So
I'm aware that the next workplace is going to be with less people. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yes, there's no question about it.
I remember when my former employer was Anderson Packaging, like I think more than 10 years ago, they started using robotic arms for production. Now it's common in most of the companies. So I believe that we are going to change the kind of positions. And I believe that what we need to do is start finding in many ways what are going to be the new careers in the future. Before, internet doesn't exist, now exists. What I'm trying to tell you is that there is too many things that in the past sounds like a science fiction, and now it's reality. It's like I remember robotic arms. In the past, it was something that we saw in Star Wars with Luke Skywalker when he lost his arm, and he get a new one. Now you can go online and look in open source about how people is giving away information to people use 3D printers in their homes to print their prostheses that they need, if they need an arm or everything. And it's an open source. You don't need to pay for that. Right. So it's amazing how I believe technology, robotics, artificial intelligence are going to replace the traditional careers that we got. And we are going to see the born of new careers in the future, more related with technology. And probably we are not going to work as you know, Lynette say, 8 hours in one place. It's because the concept of productivity also is going to change thanks to technology. So it's going to be a really interesting landscape in the future. You know, we are seeing that now. We are meeting, you know, virtually. Before, just we saw that in sci-fi movies.
Right.
Remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's common use. Before, nobody can use this. Now we can use it. And that also bring a problem with the Z generation because they don't have too many people skills. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are really good with technology, but they are not really good with interactions with other generations. And, you know, we think that that is wrong, but it's the way that they grow up with
Yeah.
technology.
Yes. Yes. And and I think that's where there's a massive gap in communication, in getting things done, and all of those because of, all of those issues. Because there is nothing greater than uh,
Interaction.
that human interaction and the care that we have for other people and the understanding of their ideas that may be very different from ours. It's that interaction that makes things better. And I think that your generation uh, certainly has that component, and I think that Generation Z is starting to have that component. I'm very concerned about the millennial generation, primarily because their love of technology and that component is so important to them that I don't know. There's a gap.
Yeah, there is a gap.
Yeah.
It's also another reason why I believe people is going to be less people in the workplace is because money. If you think about it, if you read about Twitter, when they send 50% of their employees to work from home, they realize a few things. First of all, they become more productive. Number two, they realize that they don't need all this real estate that they used to get, you know, to hold all their people in their office. That means the payment for the rent or lease, the insurance, electricity, everything. So basically, it's not just technology; it's also financial reasons that are going to, you know, use this pandemic to shrink the market and create new business models, new ways to work with less, you know, with less overhead and more technology.
Yes, there's no question about it. Well, Edward, I'm beginning to get the sense that we may have we may have overextended our welcome to people who have joined us. If anybody would like to leave, Mike and Michael, please do so. I don't want to hold you captive.
It's okay. I got calls coming in. They come in. I never know when they come in. So you know how it is. It's like a barrage.
Well, I just don't want to.
But unless,
if you
sure.
need me, please do so. Well, Mike Hobart, what are your thoughts about this piece? We haven't heard from you.
Oh yeah, it's something that's interested me all along, not only as a perspective from work, but also outside of work, just to try to better understand the younger generation. So that's my keen interest in all of this.
Oh, okay.
So, like you said, I think early on is when you better understand where they're coming from, it's easier to be able to communicate with them.
I agree. Yeah, very, very true.
Yeah.
Well,
good presentation, though.
Pardon me?
I said this was a very good presentation for me. Learned a lot.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
We really appreciate it. And if you guys don't have any other question for Bo, I guess that will be all for today. And just please remember that every Thursday at 11, we got webinars. We approach different topics. The next week is going to be about legal issues, if my memory don't betray me, about the legal issues that now businesses are facing in the aftermath of COVID-19. So please stay tuned. And if you have any question, please visit our website or give us a call. We will love to, keep you up to date with any information that we have.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you.
guys. Thanks a lot, Bo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot.
Yep.
Take care, everybody.